Today we're going to talk about something that kind of flips everything we think we know about money right on its head. We are going to explore the idea of enough, and why getting a handle on this one concept, well, it might just be the secret to real financial freedom. So let's dive in.
Okay, so have you ever felt this? It's a weird feeling. You finally get that big promotion, you hit a salary you've been dreaming about for years, and for a minute, you feel like you've made it. But then, almost without you noticing, things change. The apartment gets bigger, the car gets shinier, and all of a sudden that massive income, it just feels like it's barely covering everything. You're making more money than you ever have, but you're still stressed about bills. Look, if that sounds familiar, you're not going crazy. You're just stuck in a very, very common trap.
And right here, this is the idea that breaks the whole thing open. While pretty much everyone else is scrambling to make their next dollar, their next million, the reality is, the real secret to being wealthy isn't about getting more. It's about figuring out precisely when it's time to stop chasing.
So let's get into why so many of us feel stuck in the first place. People call it the rat race. And you know what? It's basically run by two of our most primal emotions.
Think about it. These two things, fear and greed, they create this lifelong loop. First, there's fear, the fear of not having enough money. That gets us out of bed and makes us work hard. But then, as soon as that paycheck lands in your account, greed kicks in. That's desire. We start thinking about all the cool stuff we can finally buy. And so the cycle goes, get up, go to work, pay bills, and then do it all over again.
There's this great analogy for the trap. We're basically like a donkey chasing a carrot that's dangling from a stick just in front of its nose. We're chasing an illusion, right? Because tomorrow, there's always going to be a new, juicier carrot. For us, that carrot is just more. More money, more stuff. Fear is the stick pushing us from behind, and desire is the carrot pulling us forward.
And you know, the reason this race feels so impossible to win is because the finish line is always moving. Honestly, the single hardest skill in finance is getting that goalpost to just stop. Because if your expectations just keep rising every time you get a raise, you're never going to feel any different, no matter how much more money you make.
And this chase, it can get seriously dangerous. I mean, look at the story of Rajat Gupta. This is a guy who clawed his way up from nothing to become the CEO of McKinsey. He was worth the reported $100 million. He had it made. But he wanted to be a billionaire. And to get there, he got caught up in insider trading. It completely destroyed his reputation, and he ended up in prison. He risked everything he had and everything he needed for something he absolutely did not.
And almost always, this ambition, it's fueled by comparing ourselves to other people. So, for example, let's take a rookie baseball player. He's making $500,000 a year. By any normal person's standard, this guy is incredibly rich. But here's the thing. He's playing on the same team as Mike Trout, who makes $36 million a year. And, just like that, compared to his teammate, that rookie, he suddenly feels poor.
But you know what? Even a superstar like Mike Trout isn't at the top of the food chain. To even get on the list of the top 10 highest-paid hedge fund managers back in 2018, you had to make at least $340 million in 1 year. And you can bet those managers were looking up at somebody like Warren Buffett, whose personal fortune went up by $3.5 billion that same year. So you see the point, right? The ceiling for social comparison is so ridiculously high that literally no one will ever hit it. It is a game that cannot be won. The only way to win is to refuse to play.
Okay, so how do you actually get out of this trap? Well, you have to completely change your definition of what wealth even is. So just for a second, forget the mansions, forget the sports cars. Let's talk about the real power of enough. I absolutely love this definition from a guy named R. Buckminster Fuller. He said, wealth is just a person's ability to survive for a certain number of days into the future. Let me put it another way. If you stopped working today, right now, how long could you actually survive? See, this isn't about your net worth on paper. This is the real measure of your financial independence.
So if wealth is measured in time and not in dollars, that leads to a pretty wild conclusion. Real wealth is invisible. It's the stuff you don't see.
And this whole idea is captured perfectly in something called the man in the car paradox.
The psychology here is just fascinating. So when some guy pulls up in a $100,000 Ferrari, what's he hoping for? He wants people to look at him and think, wow, that guy is so cool, so successful. But what do you think when you see the car? You're not admiring the driver, you're admiring the car. You're thinking, man, I wish I had that car. You imagine yourself behind the wheel.
The admiration goes to the object, not the owner.
So here's the bottom line. Spending money to show people how much money you have is the fastest way to have less money. Real wealth is the money you don't spend. It is the Ferrari that was never purchased. It's the financial assets that are still sitting in an account that haven't been turned into flashy stuff yet.
So if real wealth is the money you don't spend, then what's the point? Why build up all these assets if you're not going to show them off? And the answer is incredibly simple. That unspent wealth, it buys you the single most valuable thing in the entire world. It buys you your freedom. Because at the end of the day, this is what it's all about. The ability to do what you want, when you want, with whoever you want, for as long as you want to. That is priceless. It is the highest dividend money will ever pay you. Having a deep sense of control over your own life is a more dependable predictor of happiness than your salary, the size of your house, or how fancy your job title is.
And this freedom, it comes in stages. It's like a ladder. You know, having a little bit of wealth means you can take a sick day without totally freaking out about the lost income. A little more wealth means you're not terrified of your boss because you know you can afford to leave and find a new job if you have to. And then true wealth, that's when you can take a job with lower pay but way more meaning simply because you want to.
Now, to build this kind of wealth, you don't have to be some kind of investing genius who takes crazy risks. You just need time. Seriously, look at Warren Buffett. Yeah, we all know he's a brilliant investor, but his real secret weapon is just time. Of his, $84 billion net worth, over $81 billion of it came after he turned 65. His skill is investing, sure, but his secret sauce is just sticking around. All right, so how do we actually put this into action in our own lives? It's time to stop chasing that illusion, that moving goalpost, and start building a life where you're actually in control. And it all starts with figuring out your number.
So here's your assignment. I want you to sit down and figure out the monthly cash flow you'd need from your investments to cover your actual living expenses. And this part is crucial. You have to strip away your ego. You have to strip away all the social comparison. Ask yourself, really honestly, what kind of life gives you control over your own time? That number you land on, that is your enough number.
Because once you define that number, everything changes. You stop just working for money and you start figuring out how to make your money work for you. So I'll just leave you with this to think about. The highest dividend money pays is control over your time. So the real question is, what are you going to do with yours?